Talk Radio, you're in to all things music.
There are also moments where I will meet a young person who goes, I was trying to have that conversation with my mom, and I just showed them this show, and they got everything. Or a person who sees Moonlight and says, I went home and hugged my child and had a better conversation with them than I've ever had. Like, those moments are moments that I can put into my hand and hold in my heart and say, that's a made it moment. I made it.
Welcome to Making It with Terry Woolman, the show that explores the secrets, successes, and strategies for making it in the music biz. And now, here's your host, Terry Woolman.
Welcome to Making It with me, your host, Terry Woolman. I really appreciate you joining us every week and sharing in our conversations with some very fascinating and focused artists and actors and attorneys and publicists and, the various people that work in the entertainment industry. And there are so many aspects of what we all do, but each of my guests shares a purpose, a strong set of intentions and discipline and passion for what they do, including my guest today, who I will tell you about in a moment. I do want to remind you that you can find all of our episodes on entertalkmedia.com, also Spotify and iTunes under podcast if you look up Making It with Terry Woolman. I created this show to focus on what it takes to have a lasting career in the ever-changing landscape of the entertainment business. My guest today is Tarell Alvin McCraney. Tarell McCraney is an acclaimed writer. His script in Moonlight, Black Boys Look Blue is the basis for the Oscar-winning film Moonlight, directed by Barry Jenkins, for which McCraney and Jenkins won an Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay. He wrote the film High Flying Bird, which premiered on Netflix, directed by Steven Soderbergh. McCraney's plays include Ms. BLAKK for President, co-written with Tina Landau, the brother-sister plays Trilogy, Head of Passes, Wig Out, and Choir Boy, which was nominated for 4 Tony Awards. McCraney is a recipient of a MacArthur Genius Grant, the Whiting Award, Steinberg Playwright Award, the Evening Standard Award, the New York Times Outstanding Playwright Award, the Paula Vogel Playwriting Award, the Windham Campbell Award, and a USA Artist Award. He is currently chair of playwriting at Yale School of Drama, an ensemble member of Steppenwolf Theater Chicago, and a member of Teo Castellanos' D Projects. McCraney is currently working on an original scripted TV series, David Makes Man, for Oprah Winfrey's own network, produced by Michael B. Jordan and Page Fright Productions. Tarell McCraney, welcome to Making It.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me, Terry.
My pleasure. And I know that you are actually at Yale today teaching, and I appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule, not just as an educator. Well, thank you. There are so many things. Oh, it's okay.
I'm actually late and probably not prepared for our talk as much as I'd like to be. Students. It's so interesting that the show, focuses on the ever-changing, entertainment industry, because a lot of what I learned and I'm sure, and I was a student here at the School of Drama, and I'm sure some of what your training in the jazz world is taught you is that, the industry changes in a way that isn't necessarily commiserate with the way in which innovation works for artists. Right. So like somebody is coming up with a new way of doing something, a new way of engaging, or coming up with something that's very specific to them. And it takes the industry a second to figure out how to monetize that. Right. And so sometimes they panic and going, I'm never going to make any money off of this thing that I'm doing that's really important to me and that's really effective. And so I just was, having a conversation with a student about how to ignore that for as much as possible, while also, figuring out ways in which to use the industry and its current practices to, keep the lights on. So I just thought, it was one of those moments where I thought, well, I'm actually late for this interview specifically because I'm dealing with what the interview and what the show talks about.
In a way, that's perfect, because that's, that is part of being being an artist and a creator and working in the creative fields. We really need to learn how to stay present and not miss those opportunities, to mentor, to help people, to sit for a moment and let a new idea come through. So, I think you're perfectly prepared for this conversation, and that was actually a good way to enter into it. And, it is so interesting because, we both went to prestigious schools and had wonderful training and beautiful mentors in our lives, as well as both of our lives filled with challenges. And, trying to figure out how to make a living being an artist is really challenging. And I'm not so sure that my schooling really completely prepared me for that, with the exception of just saying it's going to be hard and most of you are not going to make it. And the ones that, we were actually told, look around in this room, when I moved up to Boston to go to Berkeley, look around in this room, because I don't remember what the percentage was, but it was pretty high. They said something like 80% of you are not going to complete this program, or 50% of the other 50 that remain, only about 20% of you are going to be able to make a living. So look around, because these are the people that are going to be your peers, the ones that survive. But that wasn't really good. It didn't feel like really good training for how to monetize, like you said, what we do.
Well, first of all, I think, there Richard Nelson, who was chair of the department when I was a student here, talked about ways in which to nurture artists. And I think, the industry in itself and the pedagogical forces that train artists really have a kind of binary way of looking at things. There's like the carrot and stick method. There is, lavish support and resources around specific artists and allow them to and hope and watch them flourish. And then there's a way of sort of terrifying them to death. That they don't have what it takes, that they're that they're in a room full of people that are vying drastically to take their position, and there's only a few positions left, and so they become these sort of samurai warriors of art. They sort of will destroy everyone around them and themselves to make the art better. And there's a moment for me, and I wholeheartedly agree with you, that we've got to do, and which is one of the reasons why I keep teaching. I started teaching really young as a peer educator. I started teaching when I was about 13, theater practices. And even during that time, I always felt like there are those two binary ways of working. And then there's something else, which has more to do with being a good friend to the person and yourself. And using, the lessons we've learned about all the kind of peer groups that we know and love when we think about the New Waves, the Cubists, the Renaissance. We think about these folks who, especially in the jazz era, these folks may have been quote unquote competition, but they also were peers and they were learning from each other. And there was a way in which you sort of said, "Oh man, that's amazing what you're doing. Don't stop. Do that again," right? To encourage. And that's kind of what teaching art is. It's kind of like, hey, let me help you get some quick feedback about like what I'm hearing. And you don't have to listen to what I'm saying. You can just watch what I'm doing. And if you don't like what I'm doing, cool, do something else. That isn't a way of saying that there is no room, because that's a lie. The spectrum of success is so wide and long. What school often does is narrow what success down for students and say, hey, that hoop right there all the way at the other side of this labyrinth where there's a monster in front of it and behind it, that's success. And that's just not true. There are many people in your class right now from Berkeley who didn't go into the industry, quote unquote, but are teaching art, and that's successful. There are people who are doing making music for children, which is vastly more important than some of the things that I do in the quote unquote professional world. There's people who make theater for children and for young adults, and that is so important, because that they're our future, and we keep talking about the future and the future of the planet. But if we don't invest our art in it, if we don't engage them in it, if we don't ask them what stories they want to tell, if we don't teach them the tools of the past so that they can invent better ones, what are we really doing? But of course, we don't. These prestigious programs don't tell us that. We're taught to think of any art educator as a person who can't do, so they taught, and that's completely false and wrong, and just untrue of human nature.
Tarell, there's another element too that I wasn't really taught. I'm not sure if you are either, but my sense is that this is probably something you bring into your teaching, and I know I do in mine, because I'm saying because I think you bring this into everything that you do, and I'm talking about intention and gratitude, which you seem to have an abundance of in your life. That seems to be from me watching your work, which is really everything I know about you, and of course reading about you and looking at other interviews and things. But it seems like you have a strong sense of intention and gratitude in your life, and I would imagine that carries over into your teaching as well as your art.
Again, my teaching is modeling,
right?
And so one of the first things, for example, one of the first things we did this year at the start of course is a mindfulness, gratitude, and compassion meditation. What does that have to do with writing? Who the fuck knows? But at the same time,
right.
At the same time, if the artist doesn't have compassion for themselves, it's very difficult for them to have compassion for their subjects.
Right.
It's very difficult for them to have compassion for their collaborators. And it's absolutely true that they won't have compassion for the people who they want to engage as their audience. And so, when you talk about gratitude and intention, it's a practice, just like love. There's a way to practice love, and there's a way to practice gratitude. There's a way to practice compassion and intention, and doing those things intentionally, right? Getting up and saying, I'm intentionally going to look at this work and the subjects in this work with gratitude. I'm thankful for what they taught me, even if I'm looking at, quote unquote, my enemy, a person who has wronged me. I want to look at them with gratitude for them teaching me a lesson. I want to look at them for the lesson that they can teach the world. I want to look at them for being a part of this collective that I am trying to figure out right now, for making me have to look at myself and look at the world and look at the beauty and the sometimes terrifying complexities therein. And that, it's not something that I was taught, but I had to do at some point. Because if you don't, growing up a kid in poverty, in a marginalized community, in a world that is consistently trying to monetize your efforts, right? You start to believe the overarching figure. James Baldwin talks about this in an interview he did with Nikki Giovanni, in that you believe your only worth in a society is the dollar sign that it puts on your back, and that's a holdover. I mean, you don't have to be Picasso to see the visual representation of the holdover from slavery. That the way this country was built on a kind of monetizing of human beings, and it is fed into almost every aspect of who we are as a culture. And until we do the great, incredible work of healing from that, every institution, every structure, every industry we have is based on that. What's your worth to this company? What's your worth to this institution? What's your worth to this band? What's your worth to society? What's your worth to the form? And the moment we can only eradicate that fully by looking at it and going, what is worth? I'm here. I'm absolutely here. Then I, for some reason, have some instinct to sing a song. So I'm going to sing a song. And great if it tells a story and transmits something. Great if it's shareable. Finding ways to use it to be connected deeper to community. But if you're only chasing after money behind those things, and oftentimes you will hear me say to students who want to write and or act or perform, if you are chasing the power dynamic, right? If you're actually chasing the power dynamic and the money and the fame of it, you don't actually have to practice anything. There are so many of us who are so rich and powerful who did not go to school and train and set a practice behind this. They woke up one morning and were chasing the thing and did the thing, and now they're known for it. I mean, there are people whose names we don't need to go through who are, celebrity and famous for doing much less. So if
absolutely. Yeah.
So that's what you want. You don't have to set a practice around it. But if you want to gain community, to keep community, to engage community, to be enriched by community and enrich your community, you have to practice a level of gratitude. You have to practice a level of intentional love. And of course, it's, I don't know. I think people think I'm crazy when I say that's the aim of what I do in my program. But it's because that's not what I got. When I was a kid growing up and going to magnet programs for art, I was learning that outside of my community, where I actually had learned how to tell stories, where I actually learned the emotional landscape of what a good story could do to and for you, I was being told that way of art making was less than, not worthy. I was taught that speaking a specific way that I did in my community was unseemly. And that what I was learning in these magnet programs about Chekhov, about Stanislavski, about playing intentions, that was valued and of worth. And my Southern accent, my syllabate S, my whatever it is was secondary or less valuable. And and you internalize that until someone says, great, now coming from a very authentic place of vulnerability, perform or make art. And you don't even know who and what you are anymore because you've put on this sort of mask to play the scales in the specific way. And you've forgotten how to improvise. You've forgotten how to riff. You've forgotten how to be present in the moment for fully who you are because you've been spent so much time pretending to be someone else. You mentioned it back when you were talking about the bio. That's the show I've created on OWN is exploring exactly that. This kind of double consciousness that we put on young folks, specifically young folks in the margins, specifically young folks who are Black. Right. And again, ask them specifically to be vulnerable. Be your most authentic self. Well, my authentic self came into this room 7 years ago, and you asked them to not say finna, wanna, gonna, kunna. Right. And now that I don't do that anymore, you want me to go back and find that person, or tap into their emotional life, or tap into their imaginative headspace. And that's and then also be a whole person when they go home.
Well, that's as if life is not difficult enough when you're a kid, and then you add to it growing up in poverty. Liberty City, when I was growing up in Miami, was a tough neighborhood. I'm a couple of years older than you, or more than a couple, but when you were growing up there, it was even tougher because of the crack epidemic. And so we're talking about poverty, being Black, being gay, and then to have to throw on top of that the challenge of code switching and as you're saying, double speak. I know I heard you mention in an interview just to get on the bus in the morning, you would transition, on your way to to school. And you know, and another thing that you said, Tarell, that actually struck me was that, you know, you went from poverty to access. You used the word access when you started, when you were accepted into these other programs, you know, and getting bused to for instance, the School of the Arts, you know, when you went to high school at New World School of the Arts, you know, like I know that it opened doors for you. And I know that it brought challenges as well, you know, because I've heard you speak of them.
Oh, for sure. I mean, listen, the institution, New World School of the Arts is an incredible program in that it's designed to provide us access and resources to artists, young artists, early artists who really want time to practice. But it is an elite school, meaning that everybody can't go. And the decision about that kind of engagement oftentimes doesn't come from young people. I was fortunate enough that I knew very early that I wanted to be an artist and I wanted to engage art. And so I sort of helped through sheer luck and sometimes will. I crafted an education for myself, even when I was at schools that weren't as prestigious as New World, of one of art, that I was learning art, that I was, you know, intensely learning art and practicing it often in school and out of school at the same time. And in fact, at New World, I had a job with Teo Castellanos, who runs D Projects, doing street theater. So on the weekends, even if I wasn't in school learning about Chekhov and Stanislavski, I was outside learning about guerrilla theater with another mentor. And so I was very fortunate to do that. When we look at programs like that, when we look at gifted magnet programs, the problem isn't that there's a gifted magnet program. It's just that every student has genius. Mm-hmm. And the school system doesn't necessarily locate what every student's genius is in and help them find resources and, as you said, access to help to specialize. So when that happens, a moiety is created, a split is created. Students look and say, oh, those are the talented and or gifted ones, and I'm not so, right? And those have socialized implications, right? That makes, you know, that, and when you, again, and it also, in that fissure, it makes, you know, there's a division between community, even within the school. So in the school, if there's students who are magneted and gifted, those are those students, and I'm this kind of student. So therefore, like, community is now, there's more bifurcation. There's a there's a stratosphere set up that says, you know, we're in different portions, that we're in different layers. If we think about pink places like Liberty City, or where David Makes Man, the show I'm writing on, takes place, which is in Homestead. There's a project there called Homestead Gardens that I grew up in until Andrew came and destroyed everything that we had, and then we moved back to Liberty City. But when we were there, you go back. If you're learning that the community at school is the only community, or the community that you want to excel in and has access, and you go back to the community that doesn't have access, and you bring all these, you know, skills that you learned in the access place. Well, what use are they in the community that has no access? Right. And how are you looking at that community? Are you looking to make sure it has access? Are you looking to do the hard work of gaining it access? It literally is that thing about the brain drain that we talk about all the time, especially in South Florida, and especially among communities, marginalized communities. Yes, all the engineers are going away because they're not taught that being an engineer in Florida or in Miami is worth anything to the community, but also to the person. If I don't work in the tourism industry or the real estate industry, then my value here is less than, because one, I can't afford to raise a family here, and then two, I I'm not in a community of folks who are thinking and trying to innovate and create in that way. And so it becomes one of those moments where, you're conditioned at an early age to just start looking at your community with disdain. And that takes years to process. And so going to New World is fantastic, but then I'm going to New World and I'm going to other people's communities, and I'm like, oh, school and life are similar to you. You practice art at home. You practice art at your, you don't need a job, which I did as a high school student. And you practice at school, and you have tutors that come in and help you specifically, and your parents don't make you do extra stuff because they know how important it is practicing the art is. And you live, you don't have to get up super early, because even though I don't live that far from the school, I still need to take the Metro Transit, and that can, take time. You have a driver you have a driver that takes you to school, drops you off at school, and picks you up from school. So if you're here rehearsing until 10 o'clock at night, there's a driver who's going to take you safely back to your home. Whereas if I leave at 10 o'clock at night, I've got to take Metro Transit back.
Right. You've got another hour and a half on the bus.
And so and so those things start to, people don't think about what those things do, but they start to socialize you, to feel differently about your community, to feel differently about the community you engage in. I think only through, getting to a place of quote unquote, or the carrot of what I was told success was. I was told success was, standing on stage winning an Academy Award and feeling like I haven't really done the thing that is most important to me, which is making sure my community is well and served and enriched by the stories I'm telling.
Right. Well,
and that moment really felt like.
Tarell, I would say from watching your work, and I've been watching the recent episodes of David Makes Man, and also your previous movie, Moonlight. But you are creating a change not only in television and in film, well, certainly in television, but I really believe that you are articulating or illuminating your community. And the realness of the struggle, not just the obvious, but the layered struggle of your community, the people that you grew up with in the same city that I grew up in, and I actually want to applaud you, because I believe that you are doing what you set your intention to do, in addition to winning the awards. Both are happening, and I appreciate you for that. I wanted,
thank you.
You're very welcome. We're talking about New World School, and you and I both being born and raised in Miami, and also both of us losing a parent at a young age. We were fortunate enough to have some other people step up in our lives to guide us and to be mentors and friends, and what we share, besides, growing up in the same city, different neighborhoods, clearly, but we share one of those mentors.
What neighborhood did you grow up in?
I was born in Miami Beach, and then in elementary school moved to North Miami Beach.
Oh, so that's amazing.
Yeah. So I spent, until I went away to college, and with the exception of traveling for half a year with my dad and living in Mexico. Mm-hmm. Another story, tell you off the air at some point. Okay. But my whole upbringing was in Miami, but and we share one of those mentors. Some at North Miami Beach High School where I went, I had a teacher named John Shaw, who ended up becoming one of your teachers and mentors at New World School. And I have a little gift for you. I actually invited John to call in to
fantastic.
Just to say hi for a moment and tell him his feelings about you. And John, are you with us? Are you on the air with us right now?
I'm there.
John, hi.
You hear me?
I do.
Hey. Yeah. Okay. So,
Mr. Shaw, how you doing?
Tarell, I can barely contain my excitement because I'm so pumped up that two kids, you're still in my mind, kids that I taught in math of all things,
right.
are out there, talking about stuff. And I'm so excited about where both of you have gone, and it's not about me, but I just wanted to, kind of put my 2 cents in a little bit. And it's just like, you're very eloquent, man. And I think when you talk about things, your description of your community and your growing up, there's a lot of things that I have been going on in my mind ever since I started watching, Moonlight, and then the Wednesday night program on Oprah Channel, David Makes Man. It's like I'm drawn to it. So, just saying. And you did okay in geometry, man. I was proud of you.
Yeah,
but I'll tell you. Let me tell you a couple of things that are on my mind. I heard from Forbes magazine a quote just this week, and it goes this way. It's in May 2019 edition. Half of all Americans said they always or sometimes feel that no one knows them well. And I think about you particularly because in geometry, you came up after class one day and you said stuff to me. I'm not going to say totally what it is, but you expressed your affection, and I know I saw the ABC interview, and I know you're shy, so I won't go into it totally. But you got it. You got me. You saw me. You observed me. You got me. I'm not just the teacher in front of the classroom, but you got me. And for whatever reason, it's just like, what did I do there except treat you like a human being and give you assistance and, be like a teacher ought to be. I'm not perfect, but I just felt like that with every kid, and it's something you got it, And so when in the Oprah interview, and she, you were down there in Homestead looking at this project, and you said that, what is it that took me? What is it that takes a kid growing up in the projects to be there and one day stand on the, receiving an award, an Oscar? What is it? And it's like you're telling, of your story and weaving you into it because it's going to help somebody else. Sure. It's just great. It's just great. And it's just like, we all need to do some of that. We all need to lean down and help people up. And because I think of at New World, I'm talking a lot, but I know I only got 5 minutes, they told me, so I got to compress this. One of the things about New World I always felt, and you're right, it was a special place, and you had to interview, and it didn't take everybody. But I felt like a lot of these kids in the arts, they'd be sitting in a class in the corner because they're artistic and weird and different, and they have to be invisible in the corner, in order to survive. And because they're not going to know as much math, or they're not going to, they'll know some things really well, but they're not going to fit in. And it's just like, this is the thing that I always felt like at a school like that, where you can see the genius in a kid, or you can see the potential, and you allow it to happen, and you nurture it and all that kind of stuff. This is what's about. I am so blessed that I was at that school for 20 years. It was different. It was special. And there were kids in there who were not rich, who like you came out of poverty, and we let you in because we could see something, So absolutely. Anyway,
Tarell,
you tried out in the ninth.
John, just to interrupt, Tarell just said we were blessed, to have you as a teacher and mentor. And
man, well, thank you, sir. I mean, I want you to know that I could pretty much quote you the day you came up to me afterwards. I could quote you, but, and I've held it with me, because it was one of those moments that, teaching, you don't know what the hell you're doing some days, it's kind of like a lot of work and a lot of frustration, whatever, but there are these moments that really happen when the feedback comes through.
Well, and I remember specifically, Mr. Shaw would be at Borders, which is no longer Borders anymore, in Dadeland.
Bookstore.
A bookstore in Dadeland, across from Dadeland Mall, tutoring folks in math. And when I would run into Mr. Shaw with Sylvan Seidemann, who was my guidance counselor and a great mentor in my life, we would sit and talk about how to make sure, I think I remember most of what I said, but I also remember thinking, Mr. Shaw, understands music, understands how to, how visual arts work, and that the brain of some kids like myself can't process the numbers part, but just showed me how we use geometry every day without even thinking about it in logical terms, and that instinctual part of me could be used to apply to math. And once that happened, I never failed a math class again. Before, I had failed math twice before I got to Mr. Shaw's class, and I didn't fail again after that. No, I feel
bad.
You should feel bad. You didn't teach me that, but before that, after that class, after learning about circles and the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line.
Sure is. Yeah.
And that that still is. That's sense. So we were blessed to have teachers like that who would take the time to do that, take the time to make sure to talk about the parts of the brain that are on or off, and that's what I'm talking about in terms of community and outreach. I think taking the time to look at young folks for the individual that they are, and not the machine that we want them to be.
Absolutely, yeah. We're not stuffing people. We're drawing out of them. Drawing it out of them. What is it in you that we need to build and flourish? That kind of thing. Yep. We can stuff and have you memorize everything, but what is it that how can you? Where's your voice? How can you express it?
Yep.
And you I know that you tried out in the 9th grade, right? And you didn't get in.
I didn't get in. No,
yeah, but you tried again.
I did, and I got listed my second time too, and then got in off the wait list. And I remember Ralph Remis.
Oh, really?
Yeah, called me in. Yeah, no, for sure. But again, that it speaks to the school itself is a very special place, and it's a place of access. And I think there are a lot of students who want and need kind of that specific access. And I have no idea how we do that on a large level. I don't. I mean, New World was functioning on a very specific budget, which bless our legislature has decided to cut again. This is the second year in a row they decided to.
The other thing that this is. Yeah, the other thing, North Miami Beach was a similar school in many ways. Their kids were much more expressive, and what happened was the rest of the district gets jealous, and I call it surface tension that tends to bring the peaks down and kind of level it all, level playing field kind of thing, because people don't like to hear that. Some school is privileged, quote unquote, and others are not. It's
sure.
You're taking our best kids away from us. Well, wait a minute. What are you talking about? Your best kids? What does it mean to be a best kid? And it just speaks right into where you're talking about every kid can be a best kid.
Yeah.
If you recognize it. I mean, it's a big job, but it means sensitivity on educators' part to do this. So I don't know.
It is. Hey, I hate having to cut you off, John, and you're welcome to stay listening. I want to ask Tarell some questions about the new TV show.
Absolutely. No, and then, like I said, it's not about me, but this is very cool, and I'm calming down. But it's really what a great thing to be in this. I love you guys, both of you. And it's just like wonderful.
Anyway.
I think I can speak on behalf of Tarell and I. We both love you a lot and really appreciate you.
I know.
Thank you.
Hey, man. Hey, come on now.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Great. Okay.
We'll talk to you soon.
I'll stay listening. All right.
Yeah. Thank you for joining our conversation.
All the time, Terry.
Yeah. So, Tarell, no more secret guest or surprises. But I thought you would enjoy hearing from. Well, me too. I couldn't resist inviting Mr. Shaw on the show with us for a few minutes. I want to talk about your new show, David Makes Man, which is shot with exquisite beauty and intimacy. And your cinematic point of view does not shy away from pain, racism, homophobia, addiction, love, responsibility, community, and the imperfection of friendship and family. I don't even really have a question here. It's more of something I just wanted to tell you, which is I hope that you know that you are changing lives with your words and with your heart.
Well, like I said, I can only hope, and I thank you for that. That again, it's when you're with groups of peers and peers are saying that that's happening. It's that immediate feedback that helps you keep going and keep engaging, and that's important to me. I think you all should know. You should know that a lot of what I'm doing is looking at starting with myself as the center of the centrifugal. Not at the center, but a part of a circle that continues to grow outward, which is to say, I know I need the healing of looking back at these moments. I know I need to look at these moments in a community that, and even, I always ask people when they say they're from Florida and Miami, where they're from, not to shame them or to show our differences, but there are so many portions of our community that aren't heard,
right?
And people know about, and the danger in that to me has always been that when you do say something like I'm from Miami, and folks go, great, you're from South Beach, or great, you're from South of Fifth, or great, you're from that beautiful skyline that hosts the Miami Heat every season, every basketball season, and the lights of it and the magic. Then that means that we have to suffer in silence in order to keep that industry going. We have to suffer in silence, knowing that we have a huge immigration problem, and that and when I say immigration problem, we have immigrants who come into our city who aren't allowed to be known. They are hiding. They're terrified, and it's an immigrant city. It's a city that's built for sure. And run politically, economically by folks who had to leave their own country, and yet we have governance saying things like we're not a sanctuary city. It's like, well, what does that even mean? Of course we're a sanctuary city. We were sanctuary for the millions of Cuban exiles who came over. We're a sanctuary for the millions of Haitian exiles. We're sanctuary city for the million Jews that came over during early in the turn of the century from Europe and sort of made home, and Lincoln Road what it would be without that influence. And we had to come against segregation in our city in so many ways. There were laws on the books. There were sundown laws for Black people and Jewish people up until the 70s in our city that we had to overcome, and that had to be struck down, and that's due to the hard work and dedication of the many communities there. I mean, Florida has the third largest Black population in the country, behind Georgia, and that concentration of Black people in a city like Miami Gardens and Broward, the legacy of people like Zora Neale Hurston. If I don't tell these stories, if I don't engage in finding those stories for myself and reminding myself of those stories, I lose my legacy, and therefore I feel like I'm rudderless in a world. I'm rudderless and anchorless in a world that's just buoying me to back and forth to tell its stories and of its place, and so I end up on a huge platform again with no sense of community and a sense of like, I did this, but for whom and with whom. And that's more terrifying to me than anything. So you're watching me in my art try to be intentional about my own healing and hopefully the healing of others, if that makes sense. I know that was a long-winded answer, but
no, it absolutely makes sense. And thank you for sharing that with me, because I was very curious about that part of your mission statement pretty much in your life and how you approach your work. Have you ever been asked to tone it down or compromise your story and vision? Certainly now working in television to be more accessible. Is there, or are you encouraged to go further, or people just allowing you? I mean, you landed in the perfect network for you, and you have said we are all unapologetically Black. And it's just so real. Yeah. All of the shows on OWN. So it's a beautiful collaboration. But do you ever get asked to just back it off a notch?
Well, look, David Makes Man is not an easy watch, right? Like you have to actually.
It's very difficult. Yeah.
People are like, you have to pay attention, and I'm like, yeah, you have to pay attention.
That's right.
And I think the reason I decided, and that's an intentional choice. It isn't me making it difficult for no reason. It's that I use this metaphor often. I say, if you had a 9-year-old and you came back and you left that 9-year-old's life for some reason, whatever reason that was, and came back 5 years later, they would be a completely different person, almost physically and certainly mentally. Mm-hmm. If you came back 4 years later, so they're 9 and now you meet them at 13, still you're meeting them at the cusp of something completely different. So when you're looking at someone's life, the span of 3 years feels like it's a great. It can feel like there's so much time in that to like observe and figure things out, but it's actually so quick, right. Especially when you're an adult, right? Our world we look up and we're like, it's October already. We look up and we're like, Christmas again, and so so for me, I wanted to especially with this show, I wanted you to have to look at this child's life, but from an adult's time period or time stamp. You know more about this. The time signature in the music tells you at what pace we're going to hear we're going to feel the rhythm. Mm-hmm. And the time signature in this show is swift. And if you don't pay attention to it, you will miss some moments. There are folks who have asked me a number of times, why is David sweating so often? And I go, well, it's hot in Miami. One,
it's Miami.
You're always hot. And the second part of that is the amount of pressure he's under. And there's a character who really says, you were sweating, and he goes, it's hot. And the character then says, yeah, but you were sweating even on the bus. Right. Your adrenals must be up. Mm-hmm. And again, if you're just if you're watching the show and trying to, make tacos and, and do the 9 of, it's not that kind of show.
Not at all.
You missed the moment that answered your question that you're going to ask me later. Right. And that's important to me because we miss so many times, especially with young folks who are sponges, who are taking in information, who are building lives, making man, making human being, making woman, making adult. With every moment of their adolescence, they're putting in that information and piling it up. That's why it feels so fraught. That's why it feels so dramatic. We often tell people, don't be so dramatic. Don't worry about it. This won't matter later. It's not necessarily true. Those young folks are compiling composites of themselves to get ready, right, for what they think of as a very dangerous world. And then we go back and go, well, why do you keep doing that over and over again? Well, they started somewhere. Right. Mm-hmm. And now that habit is in there. And when we said, don't worry about it, they worried about it. And now so I wanted us as adults to be mindful and have to watch, really watch there's the verse in the Bible that says, watch and pray. Mm-hmm. I really want us to, and as I said, I model because I'm doing this for myself. I want to go back and really watch those moment to moments and say, that's where it happened. The show's 10 episodes. We only really see 3 months of David's life. But so much has happened in 5 episodes that folks are like, whoa. And I'm like, yeah. And I remember it being that way. Mm-hmm. I don't remember it or feeling like it was like, I had so much time and space. It was a very charged moment. Every other day, there was something that was adding to my information about the world and how I wanted to relate in it. And so that the viewing, and so I wanted to go to OWN because there are shows that you don't have to sit down and watch that intently. There are shows that will tell you in the next scene what you missed in the scene before. Right. And that's one way to experience that's one Black experience, right? And here's another. And I wanted us to really be amongst a place where no one could say to me, well, yeah, that is the only way you can experience Black folks and that story. No, this is Tarell's version of a very specific thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Of course it's your version, but you also, you use visual and sonic tools in your, it feels like filmmaking to me, even though it's episodic TV, to draw people in. Your extremely intimate close-ups, the sense of, it speaks viscerally to me. Watching your show, the exquisite colors of the Florida sunsets against the extreme challenges of Liberty City. It's just. You keep hooking me in with the sounds and the visuals of the show. I reached out recently to actor Isaiah Johnson, who plays the role of Sky on David Makes Man. And I just asked him if he had anything, if he wanted to share anything about the show. And what he said is, the show is a reckoning of our past, present, and future selves, conscious and unconscious. So, and Isaiah brings... he brings a really strong, a lot of what we're talking about is teaching and mentoring, and that particular character is a beautiful mentor and teacher.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And I think, and again, the word reckoning, I think that he's talking about is the fact that, for the spoiler alert, and if you've watched the first episode, you'll know this, is that Sky is no longer present in David's life in a physical way. Right. Sky died. And David has taken the talks, lessons, moments that he's had with Sky, the very brief moments that he's had, and built a kind of composite, in a way, of the voice he hears. And, I wish I could say I was a genius in doing this, that I discovered something that, is such a unique take. But that's actually what we all do. We take composites of the voices, the mentors, the John Shaws, the Sylvan Sidemans, the music teacher, the parent, and we place them in our head. And actually, there's science to back this. What we describe as the voices we hear when being told about specific things are usually the voices who mentored us in that thing. We hear them say the thing that they said to us all the time. We hear them say, well, that's not that. That's the right tempo. Do you know what I mean? We hear their admonishment. We hear their praise. We hear, and there are ways in which we can chase after that approval and or chastisement to our own detriment. But because as you said earlier, we're not being fully present. We're looking and leaning onto old ideas to help us navigate in a way that is sort of autopilot, instead of going, wait, what is this right now, and who am I in this moment, and how do I want to reconcile that? And so it's a reckoning, which I love that Isaiah said, that of all three of those things coming to collision, because at that moment, 35-year-old David has to figure out at some point whether or not Sky is the viable source of influence for him at that moment.
Right. Well, it's it certainly comes from within, clearly, but not without the having some strong influences in his life. And there's a couple of things that I've heard you say, not in this conversation, but in researching for our conversation today. And there's two things that I want to say or share, and then have you elaborate on. One is that everything that we learn about survival is a good and bad thing, which is partially what you're talking about. But there's something else, and I think just intuitively I feel like this ties in. You've also spoken publicly about how grief lives in a person's body, how it settles there, and that grief catches you unawares, taking over your body when you least expect it. It sits in a small reservoir beneath your heart. It whispers to you at odd hours and yells at you in quiet ones. I found that statement to be profoundly true and somehow comforting, to me. And both of those statements that you've made, I really deeply feel that when I'm watching your TV show and also Moonlight. I got it from both of your work. Can you elaborate on those couple of things?
I can try. I mean, I think I mean that.
That's a good point. I mean, well, no, I get that because I'm asking you to do something that you've already so clearly articulated. Again, it whispers to you at odd hours and yells at you in quiet ones. I mean, again, I'm thinking back. We both have had our own personal experiences with loss, but having lost a parent at a young age and an important time in my life, and finishing my last year of high school living on my own, and Mr. Shaw stepping in and some other wonderful people to just kind of guide me and get me through that point, to not want to give up or commit suicide or just quit. There's I've never really heard it spoken so articulately, that quiet, whispers to you at odd hours and yells at you at quiet ones. It's the truth, and I feel it comes through in your work.
Well, it's the form and function of what we think of as the humanities of humanness is looking at human nature as opposed to what our relatives in the animal world do. And one of the things I know, without being an expert, that we don't do well is we don't know how much grief. We don't understand how animals grieve. We know that they do. We know that they can experience a kind of suffering from the loss of a person or a loss of another animal or a relative or someone or some entity close to them. But we don't really study it. We don't take time to figure it out. But we have come up with all kinds of forms and function around that kind of suffering in human beings, but not actually studying how it sits with us. And all I can say is that I have friends who too, like us, lost parents early in life, lost mentors or person, but lost people, friends. My father, by the time my father was my age now, he had lost 10 best friends via violence 10. You know what I mean? I don't have any kind of, and to this day, I don't know how he deals with it. I have no idea. But there's something in our culture that tells us that we're supposed to sort of squirrel that away in this sort of private thing. And we do. And what it does is it sits with us in a way that's so, like I said in the quote, it's so pervasive and so everywhere that it tricks you into thinking that it's gone when in truth you're just working through it still.
Constantly, yeah.
And I think, and if you catch yourself working through it, you often go, well, I should be over that by now, right?
Right. Right. I've already written about it. So why is it still here? Right.
And so trying to find compassion for myself, and then thinking about other folks like yourself who, if you told me for the rest of your life you were writing, songs, music, lyrics about that, I know I would have compassion for that.
Right.
And so I try to just turn that on to myself. I try to turn it back to myself and say, you aren't always allowed the proper outlets to do this thing. There is no time frame on it. And in fact, I think a part of life is that. I think a part of lifelongness is this moment. Either because whether we know it or not, there are a lot of folks who are grieving the living.
Right.
There are a lot of folks who are running away from the fact that at some point those very close to them may die or are dead to them or walked away we haven't figured this question out, and it's a question that we're all in together. And so it doesn't. It has this idea that there's a time stamp on it, or shelf life for it is. I think that gets me tricked up more than anything. Is that I sort of think to myself, "Hey, be done with this," and it's like, how?
Well, it's a part of the fabric of who we become, who we are, and also, as part of the function of art, I believe, is that it's to create a healing. In all forms of art, writing, dance, music, visual art, street art, as we're creating these moments of healings in ourselves, it's certainly we're touching other people, through the work. If you're doing it right, which right meaning with intention, with gratitude, how we started this conversation, with focus, with integrity, and we're actually, I'm looking at the clock. We're getting towards the end of our conversation. And before I ask you our closing questions, I just wanted to address something briefly, which is, I know that you've described yourself as an extraordinarily nervous and shy by nature person, but that you learned to present confidence. And how did you learn that? Was that from studying acting? Or from growing up in your neighborhood, or...
No, studying acting did the opposite. Studying acting made me more nervous and more shy.
Okay.
To be fair,
that surprises me, but yes. Okay.
Well, because I understand how it can be surprising. I think some people find the tools in acting helpful in order to present, but when you do a deep dive into what we theorize is good acting, which we say is human behavior in imagined circumstances. You then begin to go, well, how far can my imagination go? And then my imagination goes really far sometimes, and I start to get terrified. I go, wow, if I'm in that situation, here is what's going to happen to me, and my body and my mind and my spirit start to activate in this imagined circumstance, and it terrifies me. It scares the shit out of me, and so I want to retreat. And so now I look at situations in front of me, and I'm trying to again prognosticate of like how this will go. Who here is a danger to me? Who here is trying to end my life? Who here, by the color of my skin or by the sexual orientation that they perceive or don't perceive, by my height, by who is threatened by that and wants to engage me in some violent way.
Right.
And so because my imagination is doing that and preparing my body for it, I start going, oh, well, I just don't want to be around people at all. I don't want to engage. I don't want to have to sort of prescribe the situation. And I want to be able to be present. Well, I got to trust folks to do that. And so I got to be in a place that's familiar. And so that it's made me more shy and more reticent in that way. But like you said in the earlier question, in order to survive, we learn some tools, and sometimes those tools are great, and sometimes they're not.
Or they were great when we learned them, and they served us, and there's the point of your life where it's time to learn that they have served you well, and they no longer serve you.
Right, but then there's sometimes that you do need them. You will need it again. Like I'm sure at some point I will need to, faced with a certain situation, need to present a specific way. But what other room? It's. But I think it's also about making room. It's about making room for other things you can learn, and being a lifelong student to life, right?
Right.
And learning like, oh, in this situation, I can do this, and here is a very good, useful tool that can happen at this moment. Look, the human mind categorizes very swiftly. It's what we do and what separates us. We can go. We can say that color is blue and red and yellow, and these are softs and these are hard, and that's wet and that's solid, right? And that's fantastic. We can even put value judgments around those things. That's hot. You can't put your hand directly in it, right? Mm-hmm. But there are moments where you need the heat, and there's moments where you need the ice. And so the ability to be present is also something that has to be a part of that and to take in new information. And even though the brain wants to, rummage through its memory files and find the exact, yes, we know how to deal with this situation, we'll deal with it in this way. There are moments of going, actually, let me assess what I really need here. Or enjoy the moment of not knowing.
Right. Yeah. Which you seem comfortable with. And
not all the
time. but what you do have, what I've observed, is that you have humor to it. I mean, like like when I saw you being interviewed by Gayle King and you actually for this moment said, I'm actually terrified right now. And then you laughed, and I thought that's pretty beautiful because you are self-aware of the imperfections that you have, that we all have, but that you get it. You forgive it, you include it, you embrace it, and you keep it moving. It's just like and I thought that was fantastic, that moment. It made me want to have this conversation with you.
Oh, well, I appreciate it.
Because it's authentic, and I know authenticity is, something that's really important to you, that you pretty much dedicate your life to authenticity.
Well, normally I'm just thinking about food and nervousness. So I think, it's just.
Well, the thing is, we're still guys, so it's like when you say, well, how are you feeling? It's like, hungry, tired.
Yeah, exactly.
Scared. I mean, it's like, we're try as we might, we're not always, we're primal, we're animals, so yeah. I get that as well. My closing questions that I ask all of my guests are these. The first is a two-part question. Since this show is called Making It, what does making it mean to you both personally and professionally? And also, can you share 3 tips for success that have driven your career?
I mean, I think, again, that is what I'm investigating at all times. I think, I think there are moments of making it that happen all the time that we miss chasing after some illusion given to us. Mm-hmm. So there have been moments where I have, worked with a group of students to create something that's specifically theirs, and that happens, and I felt like I made it. This is a made it moment.
Yeah.
There are moments where, Barry sat me down in a small screening room and showed me Moonlight for the first time. And I had no clue, not only no clue, no even appetite for it to do the things that it did. I welcomed it when it did. I welcomed it when folks also felt the way I did. I sat down and watched that film and felt like, this is made it. This is a made it moment. I can, if I left right now into whatever, the undiscovered country that we talk about, I would be fulfilled in this moment.
Right. I understand that.
And so there are many markers that have happened to me that are like that I can stretch back, going the 38, 39 years that I've been on this earth.
You'll be 40 in October, right?
I'll be 40 next October. This October, I'll be 39.
39, got it.
Yeah, Libra season.
That's right. I'm a Libra too.
Oh, well, welcome. Happy almost birthday.
Likewise.
But the tip that I try to give my students, folks that I meet, my friends, is that I bet there are moments that you've made it to already. And that if we can love those moments along the way, we will be infinitely more joyous in our everyday lives, rather than tracking the moment that we were, that we backslid away from, being a billionaire, or backslid away from being the most of a thing, or winning said award, or, we will be much happier when we go, you know what? I set out to grow this rose bush, and now it's blooming, and there it is, and that's a made it moment. And I know it maybe I don't know. I probably sound like some sort of hippie or something.
No, not at all.
And there are moments that I want. There are moments that I'm like, oh, damn it, I really wish that this would have happened. I wish, more people were watching David Makes Man right now or something, or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. I wish for those things. But there are also moments where I will meet a young person who goes, I was trying to have that conversation with my mom, and I just showed them this show, and they got everything. Or a person who sees Moonlight and says, I went home and hugged my child and had a better conversation with them than I've ever had. Or I joined Glisten or GLAD because I now understood what my child was going through. Like, those moments are moments that I can put into my hand and hold in my heart and say, that's a made it moment. I made it.
Absolutely. My final question is, at this point of your life, Tarell, with everything that you know to be true, what would you tell your younger self if you could?
I'm still telling my younger self.
Me too.
To be honest, I'm still telling my younger self all the time, to take a breath, to breathe, and I do mean that every day. I sort of stop and go, what part of me is panicking? Like, why am I panicking in this? But what's happening? And then I think to myself, oh, I know who. The 13-year-old who thinks that, if they don't get it right, everything's going to end. Mm-hmm. And so I tell that part of me now, as I would if there was some way to do it, which, I love that you just asked me that question, because now it's making me think, actually, we do get a chance to tell our younger selves something. Like, yes, there's still a part of it. We get a chance to do that. So fantastic. What I would and do tell myself now is, it's you got to take a breath and breathe while you can. You have to, and do, especially as a person who has asthma, as a person who knows what it's like to have shortness of breath, and knows people who who didn't get a chance to take another breath. Take it while you can.
Yeah. And
enjoy that. And it works. It works. I really can feel myself go, you know what? I've always loved the wind through the trees, and I'm missing it by panicking about something else.
Right.
So,
Tarell, thank you so much for spending the hour with me. I wanted to just let you have your closing thought. Is there, I know you pride yourself in being truthful and, in your words, authentic. And since we are completely unedited, is there anything on your heart or mind that you would like to share with our listeners before we close?
I'm not sure that there's any one thing. I think the society and the world we live in conditions us at all times to not be vulnerable. And as artists, we often are trying to undo that in every session, every jam session, every lesson that we go into. We're trying to make ourselves vulnerable, right? We're trying to get back to that vulnerability. And lately I have been really looking at the practice of being intentional in being loving and generous, even in the moments of conditioning otherwise. And not for the sake of, changing the hearts of those people who want to do malice, but for the sake of preserving those who too want to remain open and vulnerable and caring and human to each other. So that's in my art making, in my making it, in my business practices, the company that I run, the companies that I run, the schools that I run. I want that if there's a legacy that I have, I want that to be it. That I tried with great intention to be loving, and to invite love in my life as well as others.
Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing your story and your perspective and your passion and integrity. I encourage everybody to go tune into David Makes Man on OWN, the Oprah Winfrey Network. go, if you haven't seen it, or if you have, go see it again, Moonlight, and go check out anything and everything that Tarell is doing. We're going to post your website and any other websites that are important to you so people can go directly to the link. And thanks everybody for spending the hour with us. We appreciate you, and we will see y'all next week.
Thank y'all so much.
Tune in again next week for another great episode of Making It with Terry Woolman.